Hi, welcome to Go Tell Mom. I'm Dianna Kelly, and I've been momming for several decades, including tending my fur babies, kids I gave birth to, kids I mentored as a broadcaster and college instructor, my kids' friends, and my friends. I'm not a psychologist or doctor, but I do know how to dig up advice from those who are, and that's what I'll share with you. If you have something to share with me, remark, comment, question, please comment below. Since the beginning of time, some of the weaker have been victimized by some of the stronger, usually starting with siblings. My brother and I used to get into major brawls over toys when we were toddlers, which usually ended up with a paddling from mom or dad. Most kids get teased by a sibling or a friend at some point. It's usually not harmful when done in a playful, friendly, and mutual way, and both kids usually find it funny. We didn't always get the humor when we were little. We eventually outgrew bullying each other. By the time we hit grade school, my brother and I were no longer hitting each other physically or verbally. In fact, we became friends in high school all the way through college. That's not to say we didn't play the occasional prank on each other, which we usually regretted, not because of a fear of paddling, but because we genuinely didn't want to hurt each other at that point. Empathy has started to kick in, which it tends to do as kids navigate through their teens. We each had bullies to deal with outside the house, so we tended to be a united front once we left the front porch. Most of the bullying we dealt with early on was because we were the new kids in school and in the neighborhood. We moved when I was heading into third grade and my brother was going into first. It was minor stuff compared with what today's kids deal with, name-calling, tripping, that kind of thing. Once we settled in and were accepted, the more intelligent of our classmates knocked it off, and the others we didn't care about. We didn't go through the Biff picking on George and Back to the Future stuff, but it wasn't fun. We didn't have social media back then. The World Wide Web puts today's kids in a much tougher position. PublicSchoolReview.com says that there are several types of bullying today's kids face. Physical bullying, with hitting, kicking, or tripping. Verbal bullying, with incessant teasing, name-calling, and slurs, and cyberbullying, where kids are tormented through cell phones and the internet. The Mayo Clinic says kids may experience more than one of those type of bullying patterns. And cyberbullying is invasive. In fact, psychologists think it's one of the reasons that kids commit suicide. They can be reached in what should be their sanctuary, their home. As a parent, you have to be vigilant when it comes to protecting your kids against cyberbullying. I did not allow my kids to have their own cell phones until they turned 18. There was a cheap flip phone that they got to take to school if they needed to call for a ride from rehearsals or practice. It landed back in the charger in the kitchen as soon as they got home. I wasn't about to let them be victimized by someone who resented their talent, which happened to my daughter in middle school. So no phone access for kids causing trouble. My kids couldn't have social media until their senior year in high school, and my son wasn't that interested in having it anyway. They each had their own bullies to deal with in middle school, and I didn't always hear about it. Education.com says that's not unusual. Kids are often reluctant to mention bullies to a parent for fear of being accused of tattling. In fact, one time when I wanted to talk to my son's teacher about a situation where I suspected he was being bullied, my son talked me out of it. At this point, he, just like my brother, went through a growth spurt, which no doubt discouraged the short bullies from getting on his case. Not all kids grow to be 6 feet tall in high school, though. The presence of a bully in a school can transform what should be a constructive learning environment into a scary place for kids. Some of the warning signs for parents are when a kid comes home with a missing or damaged personal item, or takes a different route from school, or has few friends, or comes up with reasons to stay home from school, or seems depressed after school, or starts performing poorly in school. Why does a kid bully other kids? I found out later that one of the kids that bullied me as a child was actually going through a lot of rough stuff at home, where this kid was the victim. We wound up being pretty good friends in high school after the home situation straightened out. The Monique Burr Foundation for Children says one of the most frequently cited reasons that bullies strike out at other kids is because they're insecure, and it makes them feel better about themselves, like they have control over something. Why do kids become the target of bullies? Sometimes it's because they isolate themselves from their peers. I would read a book during study time and literally block out everything around me and not notice my classmates. Sometimes the kids targeted are sensitive or anxious, which other kids may interpret as weak. For a bully, it's much easier to dominate someone who's withdrawn, usually alone, sensitive and or anxious, than someone who's outgoing, surrounded by friends, and confident. How do you prevent bullying? MBF Prevention Education suggests working with both bullies and victims, teaching bullies to be empathetic and helping them learn that feelings of jealousy, entitlement, and power or control can have potentially negative consequences from an early age. Also, teaching kids targeted by bullies to better read social cues, solve social conflicts, and develop a network of supportive people. As a parent, let your kid know that they can go to an adult if they can't handle a bully on their own. When there's an incident, talk promptly to your child's principal or teacher. Most schools have anti-bullying policies and programs. It's also helpful to get your child involved in outside activities where they can make friends. Not all kids gravitate to the same activities, though. My brother was into scouts and sports, which helped him develop his circle of friends. Not me, but I was into theater and cheerleading, which helped this introvert become more outgoing. Many of my pals in drama club in middle school were my tribe in high school. As kidshealth.org puts it, avoid the bully and use the buddy system. Having a circle of friends makes kids less likely to be a target. Encourage your kid not to give in to their temper when they're picked on, even if it seems justified. Bullies thrive on that, and when I lost my temper after a bout of name-calling in elementary school, I was the one who got in trouble, which of course encouraged them to pick on me more. There's nothing wrong with just walking away. By ignoring the bully, you're showing their words bounce off you. CBS News has advice for cyberbullying. Keep your kids off of online neighborhoods. There are social sites online such as formspring.me and Sticky Dramas that feature little monitoring and become a hornet's nest of bad online behavior. When they were in high school, I made sure I had access to my kids' social media accounts. I told them they couldn't have those accounts if they didn't friend me. I also had the password to their phone, which, yes, I checked regularly to make sure that nothing snarky was texted to them. No, I didn't give a damn about their privacy when it came to warding off any adolescent threats. No matter what form the bullying takes, dealing with it can hurt a kid's confidence. As a parent, it's on you to recognize what's going on and encourage your child to hang out with other kids who have a positive influence, which is exactly what my parents did. Mom also made a point of sitting down with me right before homework, usually at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and asking me what happened with my day. It would start out with what problems I'd tackled and how I dealt with them, and ended up with the good things that happened. Kids need to know you're listening to both the good and the bad. Then you can redirect them toward the positive. When I'd pick up my kids from whatever after-school activity they had, I'd ask how their day went, and then I'd ask, what was the best part of your day? If their monologue up to that point had been sad or depressed, taking a moment to find something good seemed to perk up their spirits. Making sure that your kids know you believe in them can help them get through the low points in their day, even bullying. This is Go Tell Mom. Now joining us on Go Tell Mom is Lori Meyer, who's worked with special needs kids as an educator. We're talking about dealing with bullies today. Kids and bullies are a problem, I think, in most school systems. We've dealt with them in ours.
Absolutely.
I was bullied when I was a kid.
It's been throughout every generation, every scenario with kids in school and bullies, inside and outside of school, whether it's on the sports field as well or
But there's a danger,
clubs.
of course, if kids get into that habit and think it's acceptable, then you're working with a bully all of a sudden when you're adults, which is not a cool scenario.
And there is a lot of damage that it does to, it depends on the sensitivity or that child, and there's different degrees of bullying, which none of it seems okay.
Yeah.
There's kids that have been scarred for years or life because of how it went too far, and that's very sad.
I actually had physical scars because there were kids in my neighborhood, and I was the newcomer in the neighborhood, and I was a bookworm, so my mother literally would chase me outside, and I'd go try to play with the neighbor kids, and they did Red Rover one time. And there was
Red Rover send Diana right over.
And you would try to break through. Well, they lined up right in front of a drop that had a gravel driveway.
That's
right
horrible.
behind it. And I wound up scarring both of my knees.
You literally had physical scars from that. Horrible.
Yeah.
And that you said also you were the new person, the new kid on the block too. And that's always a very vulnerable situation. And as parents, especially as moms, you preparing your child for being the new kid, you can say and give it all the confidence you want, but that child is the one that has to be put out there and experience it and either stand up or be uncomfortable or
And it's
That's
not
tough.
fun. Yeah, it really is difficult. I mean, eventually, whatever doesn't
kill you
makes you stronger.
Right.
Still, for a lot of kids, especially at a really young age,
Right.
that's hard to teach them that, no,
Right.
that person shouldn't do that to you. But how do you prevent your kid from retaliating? Or,
Right,
That's
right.
the other thing.
So they'll either want to retaliate or they retreat. It's either fight or flight.
Yeah.
And we also don't want the retreat where you're not standing up for yourself, but there's a
Right.
way to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
And there's also sometimes it's pointless to even try to confront some things, and you're just not going to do any good. But I don't want to take where it happens that it takes the self-worth out of that child.
Right.
I'm curious about your physical scars. Are those reminders?
Well, fortunately, they faded because
They
it
did
was
fade, okay.
several decades ago. And supposedly your body replaces itself every 7 years. Yeah, so they did fade away, but my mom spent an hour in the bathroom with me scrubbing the gravel out of my knees with a toothbrush.
Oh, ow. Oh,
Yeah,
I can feel it right now.
I mean, it's pretty when you're 9 years old.
That's devastating.
Yeah.
It's very traumatic. You know,
Yeah.
there's some little post-traumatic stress there
a
going
little
on.
bit right then. But again, like I said, you
Right.
outgrow it, and we eventually, all the kids in the neighborhood became friendly.
Really? Okay,
But
right.
that was one of those things that I
Sure.
think once it happened and they saw me get up with bleeding knees, they all went in different directions after that,
Oh,
and
they all
didn't pull
scattered
something like that again.
again.
Because my mother, God rest her soul,
Right.
was 6'2".
Bless her heart.
And you
Oh.
would not want
Right.
my mom mad
Mad
at
at
you,
you.
especially if you were a little child.
Sure. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that wasn't a problem again. And one of the moms actually had invited me over.
Oh, that was
She had a whole bunch of kids.
Sure.
And they were the nice kids out of that
group.
group of kids. I think that helped make us a little bit more social.
Right,
be going
right.
through something like that.
It does.
Little kids don't understand that at the time.
They don't understand.
And they
It's-
shouldn't have to
They
understand that.
shouldn't. I understand, although there is a little bit of life lessons to be learned from it, and you do have to get a little bit tougher. We can't have the thin skin, but there's certain things that cross the line, and that's just unacceptable. What would you tell yourself, like now, if you were able to go back and talk to yourself?
I would just say when they were lining up like that, I would just wave and say, "See ya," and
There you
walk
go.
home.
I like that. That was clever.
Yeah, I can be clever,
Right, we can.
many years
many
later.
years later, we're really clever. We have a
Yeah,
lot of.
yeah.
How does my daughter jokingly say it? We're more wisdomous.
Wisdom.
That's my new
like
word I
that.
want to put in the dictionary.
We're going to add that to the list that Merriam-Webster just came out with.
Wisdomous.
Wisdomous, yes. So what do you as a parent do
Right.
if your kid comes home with a bullying issue?
And first, I like to look at it two ways.
Mm-hmm.
First, I want to put the tools in the toolbox before we get to those issues.
Right.
And it starts with, as a parent, building confidence.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to say to build confidence, but how do you do that in a child? And that child needs to have successes, but not necessarily being the winner, but being successful and being strong in who they are,
Mm-hmm.
even if it is different. And it's not just praising and giving participation awards either,
Right.
but building their confidence. So when we do cross those things that happen like that on the fly,
Yeah.
I think the burden of being bullied is lessened. Or if somebody's trying to bully them and they are confident enough in themselves, they don't get bullied.
Yeah.
And if they're able to build up, and I remember for my daughter, and I think this was part of her confidence, but it was like preschool. And, preschool picking and teasing on kids
Oh,
is
yeah.
different than in high
Yeah.
school. And the high school, I think, could be much more traumatic. But there was a little boy that would always go up to her and say, "Jessica Messica." Okay. Now, does that even sound like anything bad? But when you're
Yeah.
that age,
Yeah.
Jessica Messica was very upsetting to her.
Of course
you
it
know,
was.
and it was,
Yeah.
and he really liked her and he liked to hang out with her, but Jessica Messica, and she would just kind of put her hand on her hip and be like, whatever,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But she had, I think, enough of the confidence. And even though she kind of did say it would bother her, but she didn't show that it bothered when he
Right.
would do that. And I
Right.
think that's some of those tools that we put in their toolbox. And then I think that also building their confidence in things helps them with relationships, or maybe in her having a daughter, and then of course her dating now that she's older, not being swayed by the boyfriend that may want her or not want her to do certain things. And I think that kind of filters into that, and
Right.
we build that. So, but I think that starts with all the stuff you want them to learn over time.
Exactly.
And then when those things happen,
Yeah.
we already have a base, and then we can go from there, and hopefully it helps.
Yeah.
And hopefully it does.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I wonder sometimes if I gave my kids enough confidence in that. I wasn't one of those moms that would let my kid be bullied for obvious reasons. It's like, I'm not you, or you're not going through
that.
And and my
you were
kids
involved
moved,
with your kids in their
tried,
life, right?
But my kids moved around a lot, so they were constantly the new kids,
right.
You know, because we'd move from market to market,
Right. Being in this industry, and we did too. Every couple of years, Jessica was in a different school, so it's hard.
Yeah, it really is. And my daughter would wind up. She has a wonderful voice, when she was in middle school, she did not. She liked to perform, but all the girls in school were. I mean, Janina would just sing a note.
Right.
They would be like trying to run up the scales like some of these pop stars are.
Sure.
And not pulling it off nearly as well.
Right.
And not realizing that they had vocal problems in their future if they, like
from
these rock stars did, you know,
Sure.
from doing that. But Janina would just sing the note. And so she would get solos and and it got to the point where the girls would corner her and say, you know, don't
try out for that, or
exactly.
Really?
Yeah. And she wouldn't mention it to me. Her teacher mentioned that you know, her chorus teacher had mentioned that, you know, and it's just, my kids would almost protect me from when they were bullied.
That stuff, right? Yeah, really? Because they just know that you'd be going in and taking care of it.
Mom would be Valkyrie in a minute, you know.
You know, and we came from a different industry. Well, Jessica's hobby growing up was being a dancer, but for a little while, a competition dancer, and that could be a very we've all seen dance moms, and the moms can be just as bad as the dancers. Yeah. But I will say this group that she kind of clicked with for a long period of time, and they all came from different schools, and they kind of unknowingly took on this philosophy. And there's a little dancer philosophy that says, you know, crushing the sparkle of one doesn't make you shine brighter. Right. I think it's something like that.
I like that.
And the girls, they just clicked really well with each other, and they were very proud of each other. But outside that circle, it was very competitive. They're like, oh, you're in this dance with us, or, you know, or, I mean, or like, oh, you know, she can't do and they would just look at you, you know, and in that kind of snooty girl way or whatever. Yeah. But so I was really happy that she had that group of girls that she's still friends with today, that they all danced with, and they were very supportive of each other.
They had each other's backs.
And that was really cool, because it, you know, and like I said, even some of the moms or dads, it could be kind of a little crazy, which is kind of sad.
Now we have cyberbullying to worry about too with kids.
Big time with the keyboard warriors putting things out there. It's, you know, especially I think for high school and middle school,
it's tough.
It is very tough. People they'll post something on Facebook, kids more use the Instagram. But like prom pictures or homecomings going on right now. Yeah. And most people are supportive, but maybe they don't like the dress, or somebody who looks like they're trying too hard, and they're just ripping each other apart.
That's just
or
cruel.
Private message. It's just that is not necessary. I mean, if you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. You know, let's try to keep those positive vibes. And it's not always about participation awards and not always about winning, but you can be supportive and nice. You do not have to be nasty, you know. And just because everything is, like you said, the internet or social media or keyboard warriors, it feels like I think people just let loose and it wouldn't be what you would say in person. No, because most kids that are like that are cowards. Big time.
You know,
Big time.
And they're the ones that would talk behind a kid's back or, you know, and now this is just the cyber presence of talking behind someone's back.
So what do you think? I mean, I know there's age restrictions and limits to some of this stuff, but kids can still get on it. Their parents can sign them up or whatever. Like, do you think there should be more restrictions, or like, it's almost like getting your driver's license. You had to take classes and you had to pass a license test. I mean, should there be more of that, or is that too much control? I don't know. Leave it still up to the parents. I mean,
Facebook always had a policy of no younger than 13.
Right.
You know, which I respected. I thought was
absolutely. But still, think about it, 13.
Yeah.
What do you really
at 13?
Know at 13?
Yeah. Some kids get bored, then they vent their spleen on, you know, which is not a healthy way of doing things.
No.
But on the other hand, you can block
somebody.
You can report them.
Parents can monitor who's
doing things
on their social media.
And a lot of times with schools, they can report them to the school.
Right.
There was a big issue with this when I was working in Des Moines, and there were some local schools where there were 6 suicides at one school.
Oh my goodness.
You know, and it was really heartbreaking.
Oh my goodness.
And a lot of that these kids were getting bullied.
Right.
They they didn't feel anybody loved them or cared about them, and they were afraid of mentioning something.
They were afraid to mention, and I think, and I'll bet you all of them or most of them were tied to social media bullying. You know, because there is some things on private messaging, or some of those that are only up for like 24 hours. That, you know, you're ugly. You know, nobody would ever want you. You know, they put, and I won't say some of the things that they put on air, but nasty stuff. And I think Netflix, wasn't it, that came out with this one particular movie called 13 Reasons Why. And it was 13 Reasons Why, I think, that led to her suicide. And it was tough to watch. I watched it. But I guess, and I was dealing, you know, as a teacher in middle school and early high school, and being removed from it, being a little bit older than that age, but it really makes you think of how vulnerable and how insecure, and I'm going to lean a little bit more towards the girls, they are, and not that the boys aren't, but
I've seen plenty of insecure boys. Absolutely.
And I think there was some strange statistic that the boys are more successful at actually like pulling the trigger when it comes to suicide, but I hope my statistics are right, but the females were more apt to be constantly thinking about it because they're so, you know, and there's insecurities on both ends of it. But it was just very interesting at how these 13 reasons why, and, you know, you have this one reason, this other reason. One could be a boy that tricked you, because girls are vulnerable at those ages, that tricked you into maybe doing things
that you wouldn't normally do
in a physical, maybe sort of sexual way, or they take a picture that wasn't necessarily a sexual thing, but, you know, the way you angle things or take a picture, or if somebody's sleeping and you kind of whatever, or fell asleep, and it made it look not what it should be, and it was very embarrassing. So that's one of the reasons. And when you pile on the reasons and the snowball effect and how it really can damage a person from the inside out, and then which led to the suicide.
So how do we fight this?
Well, get back to, you know, it still takes a village, and it's not just in some parts. I just want to say it's fully the parent's responsibility, but it does take a village, and not every child is blessed with I mean, we're all blessed with different levels of type of parenting, but even sometimes the best of parents, you know, some things
they may not see it,
or kids get in the wrong crowd without you even thinking about it, or you think you're in that better school. There's just so many things that these kids need, and that's where I think in the educational field, the teachers, the schools need to support. And I know that there's a lot of programs out there, and it's hard sometimes for the kids to take it serious because it's kind of, you know, but
it is.
It is, but it's the friend, your group of friends, it's your school, it's your parents. There needs to just be more of the social emotional learning, and they call it the SEL. And I know a lot of the schools here in Sumner County do a lot of this social emotional learning, but, you know, we need to do more as a community.
And we probably need to start it at an earlier age.
A very early age, definitely. And we probably already are, but it needs to be more until those statistics and those numbers go down. And unfortunately, the numbers went up during the pandemic.
Yeah.
A lot of them were
because kids were at home.
Right.
Bored.
They were either
Guess what
bored
they're
at
doing.
home or put back in environments, and especially the type of school kids I work with, they were put back in environments that weren't healthy home lives, where the teachers were their main adults that kind of look out for them.
Yeah.
But like you said also too, they weren't having the social interaction. They were bored. They're just so many things that were just messing with them. And I think in some ways the other end of what that pandemic caused really damaged a lot of kids. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes, always a pleasure.
Go Tell Mom. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Go Tell Mom, where we chew on stuff that you talk about with your mom, or maybe not. I'm Dianna Kelly. If there's something you want brought up, something you want to add, comment below, and I'll be back next week.